Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live Podcast. So glad to have everyone here today. Hope that we can have a great conversation today so that we can gain wisdom and be able to find good ways to navigate current times and deal with the issues that we're looking at. And welcome. Be sure to let me know where you're joining from so that be aware. Also, be sure to feel free to make comments, ask questions, because your participation is so key to making this the best possible podcast, as well as giving us the most opportunity to grow in wisdom together. And so I look forward to hearing from you. And then also, as I always do, I like to be sure and um, explain how we view wisdom on Wisdom Seeker Live podcast, and it's wisdom is a process, and that process is starts with the journey of gaining knowledge, and we all gain knowledge a lot of different ways, formally, informally, and that's great because that's a great starting point. It's not the problem that a lot of people think is that's where it stops, and my hope is that people will learn that's not where it stops. That indeed our journey is just beginning, and we move forward in that journey to the next step, which is to begin to apply our knowledge in life through experience and gaining understanding of how the knowledge works and how to use it. And so just hope that we can continue through. And of course, the last and big step that we have in the process is to begin to see our knowledge and our understanding from a much bigger perspective, a perspective outside of ourselves and bigger than ourselves, so that we begin to understand how our choices are affecting not just our own lives, but the lives of others around us. And that's a key step in the process. And for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, then we need to begin to see things through God's eyes, is the way we like to express it. And when we do that, it gives us a much bigger picture view of our life, others' lives, and how they work together. And so we hope that you are on a wisdom journey, and that we can be on that journey together to seek wisdom. Very important that we take the time and intentional choices to seek out wisdom, because once we gain wisdom, it helps us in so many areas of our lives. So want to welcome Rick and Atif and Zaid and Shanti and Florence, Shanur, Robert, VJ. Glad to have all of you with us today, and I look forward to getting your thoughts and perspectives. I do want to do a bit of a disclaimer today because I know this topic is pretty tough, and I want us to dive into it because it's something that we're all facing right now. And one of the disclaimers is I'm not presenting myself as having all the answers, because I know that I do not. I have perspective that I've gained because I've been around a while, but I don't have all the answers. So I am, along with you, seeking wisdom in how to deal with this situation we find ourselves in. We've got this pandemic that's been going on, and it's affecting everyone's lives and even our livelihood and the health of some of us. And then now we've got a war going on between Russia and the Ukraine, and other people talking about getting involved. And Unfortunately, there's even reference by some people in some places of World War III and all of that. And so my desire today is to look at that and also look at the concept and principle of peace. Another disclaimer is that I would love to see world peace as much as anyone, but I also recognize that the likelihood of that happening is very small. It is possible, but not probable. And the key we should look towards is how to manage dealing with that without allowing it to overcome us. Part of the challenge that a lot of people are facing, and I know this because of actually asking people where they're at. Are they struggling? Are they feeling overwhelmed? Are they feeling anxious? And so it is a challenge that is before us. And then also, if that weren't enough, many of us are feeling very overwhelmed with our work and trying to manage that as well. And welcome, Anton. Glad to have you from Kyiv, Ukraine. Look forward to hearing your perspective, because I know for you and others in your country that this is something affecting you immediately and very closely. So the goal that I have is to, again, begin to get perspective on what's happening around us. And I want to remind us that the goal is for us not to be living in anxiety and fear in all of this. And the reason being that in order to be of value to anyone around us, our family, our friends, or if we are ultimately involved directly with what's going on around the world, to be able to be of value for those in that situation, we need to be really grounded and strong. And those of you and us that consider themselves leaders need to be in a position of calm and strength and courage to be there for others. The graphic that I used today is one of a lighthouse in the storm. And I like to look at examples from life. And this one, to me, is a good example of managing things when we are in the storm. And the value of the lighthouse is it's not designed to keep the storm from happening. It is designed to help those that are in the storm navigate safely where they need to be, so that they are not in danger of crashing on the rocks. And that's what we need to learn to be for ourselves and others. And so we're going to talk about some ways to do that. Anton, thank you for sharing this information. Will get a chance to look that up. Those that are participating can check that out. And then once I'm able to see what you shared after we go off from live, I'll be glad to comment and see if I can offer any insights. So let's just take a moment and think about the wisdom journey and how just that process helps us. Right now, we have a tendency to get inundated with lots and lots of knowledge through news media, through social media, through newspapers, and just getting information from people all over the world. And that knowledge by itself can be very overwhelming and cause us to feel helpless, and also cause despair to set in. And the goal here is to try to avoid that happening, because in order to be good for ourselves or for others, we need not be in that state, and we're not designed to live in that state. So perspective starts with knowledge. Then we need to start looking at applying what we know, using it in our lives. And this is a place where we go through an exercise that is very helpful in all of this, and that is to consider this knowledge that we're taking in. Can we control what it's about, what it's telling us, what the knowledge is about? Can we control any of it? And if we cannot, then we need to ask another question. The next question is, can we influence whatever this knowledge is about? Something that we can maybe not control it, but we can affect it by the choices we make. And if it doesn't fall into either of those categories, then it's important for any and all of us to take the next step in this process of prioritizing, and then take time to let go of these things we cannot control and we cannot influence. And for me, I think one of the best methods that I find is that when I go to let go of it, I pray. I pray for those involved. I pray for those that can affect it and control it. And I pray for everyone around us to not get overwhelmed by it. But at that point, I turn it over to God. I let go of it, because if I don't, it becomes hard not to be overwhelmed, not to, out of a heart of compassion for other people, to feel hopeless. And the last thing that people that are being affected by this and that are helping to control and or affect it is for the rest of us to become so caught up in it that we can't provide perspective, we can't pray, we can't function to be an example of calm, an example of peace, to be able to support others, generally indirectly. So go through this process, and with everything going on, war, pandemic, work issues, home issues, all of these things, ask yourself, can you control it? If so, get a plan. Make a plan to take steps. And I suggest that your plan start with small steps, because rarely are we going to take a big giant step and have a great impact on much of any of it. So as you make a plan to control or affect things, be sure to start with small steps. But again, if you cannot control or influence it, then it is very important to let go of it and to turn it over to God and seek our own inner peace to be there for those that are struggling. Just such a key part. And one of the best ways I know of for us to be in the right place, and for those of you that have been a part of the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast for a while, you've heard this before, but I think it's worth continuing to remind us to disconnect from the noise, the things that we don't need to necessarily expose ourselves to, disconnect from it and observe. And that means starting to observe ourselves inwardly, looking deep inside. If we're anxious, we're stressed, we're fearful, that is not a healthy place to be. And if so, as we observe ourselves inwardly, consider if we're in a state of fear and anxiety and internal conflict. And if we are, those things we can make choices to control and or affect, and make a plan to do so, whatever that looks like. Also, during this process, we observe outwardly what is going on right around us, where we might be able to actually control and influence things. Observe, get off autopilot, quit going through the motions as always, and really consider what's going on. And again, go through the process of what I see, what I observe. Can I control or influence? If not, then let go of it. And during this process, as you go further, as you observe things, then consider uh, those things from a bigger perspective. That's where we begin to think about priorities. The priority of, do I need to make changes related to this? Or is it something that is not something that I am designed to deal with? And so go through these processes is so important. And we talk about world peace, and again, I would greatly like to see world peace, but we are going to find it impossible to even approach world peace if we are internally conflicted. We need to be at peace with who we are, what we are, in order to be able to even consider affecting peace outside of us. If we don't have internal peace, we probably will become part of the problem, because it is when we are not at peace that we will tend to conflict with other people. So, very important high level principles that we need to consider as part of this. So I want to ask the question of the audience. Are you struggling right now? Are you dealing with anxieties and fears? Are you feeling like the world is in a bad place? And I know some people even see this and are thinking about anticipating the possibility that this could be World War III. Is any of this affecting you? If so, share about it. One of the things that we can do for others, even at a distance, is to be a listening ear for those people. Be available. The good news is with an international platform such as LinkedIn and the capability to communicate all over the world, we can at least engage and listen. And as we listen, we may not be able to take physical steps in response, but the one thing we can do is we can pray. And I know that I am part of a group, and we're continuing to work to pray with the idea in mind that we are going to influence what's going on through prayer. And I believe very much in the power of prayer. I've seen it happen countless times since I've been around a while, and I'm paying attention. I'm making a conscious effort to observe and learn. I see the power of prayer. I see it affecting things, and so we can do that. In the meantime, what we also need to do is to move on and forward with our life, because that way, if there is an opportunity for us to do anything, we are then in a ready state to be able to respond. So just keep that in perspective. And we'll come to one other concept and principle that I've really looked at again this week that factors in. And yeah, Rick, I understand it is very concerning. I have 5 grandchildren myself, and I think what a mess that they may be inheriting. And at times I feel a little helpless in that, but what I have figured out is by building in principles of wisdom into their life, that I can help them be prepared as much as possible for what they might be inheriting, or to help them be prepared to be a voice or a standard of change to make it better. So it's so key there. I appreciate you sharing. The other thing, and this continues to come in front of me, and I think this is something that we continue to need to be very, very intentional in. And I don't mean to be somber today. I know I'm sounding kind of negative, and I don't like being negative, but we've got realities we're dealing with. But one of the realities that we always deal with, that none of us can escape, is death. And the best way that we can live and live freely and abundantly is addressing death. And part of the just practical reason that many of us are fearful and anxious right at the moment is because what we're being forced to be faced with this pandemic and with everything else, with the war, is that we are not going to live forever. And when we start getting faced with that, if we haven't dealt with it, we haven't prepared for it, it will make us very, very anxious, because without hope of being ready for death, then we will always be frightened of death to the point that it will cause us to freeze. It will cause us to have fear to such an extent that we will stop, or our bodies will react and even become ill from it. Welcome, Lutemba. Appreciate you being here. And so we just got to keep this in perspective. And when we can learn to intentionally ask questions and face the issue of our own mortality, then we have a much greater chance of not only living free, but helping others along the way as well, because we're not driven by fear of the worst thing that can happen to us here on earth, and that is to die. You know, that is the hardest thing to overcome, is the fact that we know that we will die. But if we have dealt with that in some fashion, and we have dealt with that and prepared for it, then we take that out as a concern, and it allows us to be able to deal with things more effectively. So just let's be sure that we are beginning to deal with that and to ask ourselves questions and move forward with seeking that out. And there are people that we can talk to. I know for me that I am more than willing to talk to anyone, because I have gotten to a point that death is not something that brings fear to me or anxiety. It is something I know I will experience, and I'm closer to that more so than many are, and so I'm having to face it. And there are ways, there are principles, truths to help us do that. Welcome, Sherry, and welcome, Rob. Glad to have you with us today. And let's see here. Sherry makes a comment, says, great podcast topic. We do need to prepare for the time when we will make our transition. Indeed. And when we can do that, we can begin to not focus on what's going to happen, but focus on living before it happens. And so again, please, if you do nothing else, be sure and deal with that for your life. have talked with on LinkedIn about legacy. Part of legacy is looking down the road and considering what things will look like when we do transition from not being here physically to wherever. What are we leaving behind? I think I'm confident Rick thinks about legacy because he mentions his grandchildren, as do I, and even my children. And as I consider it, it is valuable for me that I can do so without being fearful of death. And by the way, one of my priorities is to begin to help even my grandchildren look at our life from a realistic view, not because I want them to be sad or feel helpless, but just the opposite, and help them prepare as early as they're able to grasp it, understand it, and begin to make decisions for themselves. So, very important that during these times to really consider this. And I even have, excuse me, dry throat this morning. I have a good friend on LinkedIn that is named Lila Smith that is even doing a series of posts on LinkedIn about what she calls the dying project. And it is just facing, the short version is she's dealing with facing the fact that we all die. And what do we do to be ready for that? And the uncertainties and so on. So as we look out at war and peace and other scary things going on around us, be ready. Be ready to deal with and face the worst fear that most of us have, and that is dying. And when we're prepared for that, we can then move forward to truly live. And we can find a way to be at peace in ourselves. And the more we can be at peace in ourselves and be an example and provide insights to help others find the peace within themselves, then the more likely that we are to have peace in some form or fashion in the world, so that we can help head that off. So just such a key message here. And Anton, who is in the midst of it, know that we are praying for you, and that we are people of faith, that we, in fact, this evening, that we are going to be gathering for a virtual prayer time to pray for the Ukraine. And so I really hope you'll pass that along to everyone around you to not give up hope. And I hope that if we can be of value, that we can know and do that. I know there are some people that are focused in on raising money for support. So again, there are ways that we can do things, but be aware. And if you can't do those things, then don't let that become a point of fear, anxiety, to the point that you aren't good for the people immediately around us. Hello, Karen. Glad to have you today with us. And Lee, welcome aboard. Appreciate you being here as one of our regulars. So I hope and pray that all of us can find our peace and our place where we can be living well, so that we can be a light of hope for others, that we can be a source of encouragement. And then as opportunity presents itself, that we can get engaged and involved, because we have a lighthouse in our own life that we can then share with others. Because when those that are in the midst of the storm don't need to be focused on the storm, they need lighthouses. And that's what we can be when we are prepared and we are at calm and at peace in our lives. Then we can be a lighthouse for others in the midst of their storms. So I really pray that we will find wisdom in this, which includes bigger perspective. And I will share from my own experience that one of the reasons that I don't fear death is that I am aware, or my belief is that this physical life is not all there is. That what we are, who we are, and how we're created is not just to live this physical life. It is about being a part of eternity. And so death at that point in that perspective becomes, as I believe it was Sherry referenced, it becomes a transition. See, when my body dies, that doesn't mean I'm done, I'm gone. That just means I'm transitioning of how I will exist and how I will be. And part of my preparation that I am part of now is being ready not just to live here now, but to live in eternity and what that means. And when I do that, when I am prepared, it makes a huge difference in my life for me to be able to be in a place to be a leader and lighthouse for others. Let's see. Okay, so we've got a good question to deal with. Rick says, "Is American intervention the only real way to stop this madman?" Rick, oh goodness, if I had a crystal ball and I could answer that question, I got a feeling that I could be very popular and a rich man. What I know is that the answer here is not simple, because if America, if America determined that we needed to deal with this in a protective fashion of the people of the Ukraine, that it's certainly a admirable approach, but also know that the challenge we face is if America gets involved, this could feed into a much bigger picture of a time of war. And some would say that if we get into World War III, that it will be highly destructive and devastating. Don't know. What I do go back to, though, is that as people of faith, that we can pray, and we can pray earnestly, and it affects a lot. It affects things in a lot of different ways. One, our prayer and our release of those things and turning it over to God helps us. Okay, it helps us greatly, and when we are better prepared, we have a better chance of helping others. And it also affects the things around us. I know that people in my own circles that have been physically healed, emotionally and mentally healed as a result of people praying. So, American intervention, at a minimum, we need to pray. Beyond that, I'm not sure, because the potential of what could happen. I am ready and willing, if needed, to be a part of interventions, prayer, of course. But if I was called and needed to be a part of helping defend and protect people of Ukraine, I'm willing to be there and ready to move forward. So, Rick, like I told as we started the program, I don't have all the answers, but I know what I know for us to be able to be ready to help and look for those answers. So, Lee, ask another deep question. Can a secularist believe in the afterlife? Anyone can believe in the afterlife, Lee. It's not exclusive to any one group. And it's interesting that throughout history, it's been a question that a lot of people have struggled with, to a point that in biblical times there were even two distinct groups that wrestled with this, and they were called the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And one group believed very much in an afterlife. The other said there was none, and they made their choices, and they even established religious tenets based on that perspective. What I would suggest to people is, some people say, well, you can't prove there is an afterlife. And that is correct in the strictest sense. I can't prove it. But I see evidence of it and understand it from that standpoint. And then just purely logically, I ask myself, if to accept the idea of an afterlife, what are my risks and what are my rewards? Okay. If I approach and believe in an afterlife, my risks are minimal. Okay. Because, if I make a change, I'm not losing anything of value. But if I decide that there is no afterlife and it turned out to be wrong, I risk a lot because I'm not preparing for that inevitability. So, from my perspective, and this is my opinion, but I will offer it, that that a logical, rational approach is to prepare for an afterlife. If it turns out not to be, we're not any worse off for preparing. If it turns out there is and we aren't prepared, then we have a whole different situation. So preparing for death, we all know that that's inevitable. We have seen so many progressions and possibilities with science and medical science and all of that yet there is still not an answer that will keep us from dying. And I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be sound morose or morbid, but it's a reality. And the best thing we can do is face that reality and find answers to being ready for that. And I know there are a lot of different opinions of what that looks like. I have mine and a set of beliefs, and I'm more than happy to speak with anyone about those beliefs and explain my journey and what I found. At a minimum, though, please, I pray and I beg you to face that and deal with it. Come seek out answers rather than just hope that we live forever physically. And see, though, with the knowledge that we are going to die physically, what are the implications, and can I prepare for it? How can I prepare for it? And seek out the answers and approach it looking honestly for real answers. Don't go with a mind that is closed and already decided, but open to finding what I reference and a lot of us understand as truth about what is there to life and afterlife, and how do I prepare? Because there are ways. And one of the things that my friend Lila even commented is that she likes the certainty with which I approach life and death, and it's a direct result of my faith. And for me, I am confident. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm ready for when my time to face death is, to move on, transition to eternity, and to have eternity that is going to be positive, beneficial, better than what I deal with in life now. the struggles will not be there any longer if we are prepared for it. ATIF offers Dr. Kubler-Ross did amazing work on death and dying. I know the name ATIF. I've not read Dr. Ross's writings. There are many out there, by the way, like myself, that are more than happy to have those conversations, to discuss what is dying about and can we be ready, and if so, what that looks like. And think about this logically. I like to be very logical, even though some people say, well, how do you be logical and have faith? That's another topic for another day. But as we look around us, the greatest fear of war is that we die or others die. And if we are prepared for that likelihood or that possibility of it happening sooner rather than later, then our whole approach, our whole perspective changes. And same thing with the pandemic. The worst thing that can happen with this virus that is out there is that it can take away our physical life. That's the worst that it can do. And if we look at life in light of eternity, then that begins to help us know or have a sense that physically dying is not the worst. It is just a step in a process. So that's some of the value of making determination whether you believe in afterlife or eternity. And facing those things is very important. And we have a false assumption that we are going to live on average to be 70 to 80 years old. And I understand where that comes from, and I appreciate it. But we also have seen enough evidence around us that we really don't have a guarantee of that we could have a very short physical life. And that's why I think it's valuable that those of us, as we prepare to face the world and help our children and grandchildren face that as well, we do well to have some of those conversations with them. And if we have found an answer that causes us to not fear death, then share those answers with your children and your grandchildren. If we don't have good answers for that, then find some. Seek it out. Really look, because I believe that the answers are there when we look and ask and open to learning about it. And find people, people that are at a place where they don't fear death, and ask them, how do you deal with it? That's part of the value of being humans among humans. Part of the value that we offer each other is that as we go through this journey and gain wisdom. See, part of what this is getting wisdom about things. It's not that are hard to deal with. And so seek that out from other people. Find people that seem to be at a place that you want to be. And don't try to mimic them, but rather find from them the principles that they work from and begin to apply the principles as it fits in our life, as it works in the place we are at, so that it is not just taking over and trying to be someone else and believe as strictly as someone else, but find that information and belief for ourselves and find wisdom. Don't accept things at face value. There's nothing wrong with challenging and growing, because if we're truly seeking out answers and truth, we will find it if we keep looking. Let's see here. I think this is Sherry, because and my apologies, Sherry. I know it shows up as LinkedIn user, but that seems to be a peculiarity that we have in the live stream. So Sherry shares something here. I think it does to remember our soul, our spirit lives on after our human body dies. Before my mom died last February, she had a near death experience. It was paradise. She said from the hospital bed she was ready to go back to the love she felt in heaven. And yes, again, there's mounting evidence for those that are open to it, and even under scientific scrutiny, that that people have experienced something beyond this physical life. And there is even some information that came out years ago that people that die actually their body weight changes immediately upon death. A lot of different evidence for there being more than just the physical life we live. And hopefully that gives you some hope to find out truth. And I'm speaking not just to Sherry, but to everyone, to consider the afterlife, eternity, whatever term you like to use, and how to be ready and help to take the sting, if you will, out of death. Because when we do that, we become so much freer to really live. Because I don't worry about death, it allows me to make choices that mitigate the fear of and the concern of risk. Now, just so you'll know, first of all, I'm not seeking to die. I'm enjoying being alive physically. And I'm also not advocating that we throw caution to the wind, because that's unwise. But it certainly allows me to prioritize in such a way that, again, I'm not fearful of or dealing with anxiety in storms about dying as a result of the storm. And so dealing with that makes a difference. And even regardless of that, don't allow or make good choices to not be overcome by fear and anxiety in your life. And there are a lot of people, I know many here on LinkedIn, that will be more than happy to talk with anyone about this and to be there for them. And there are even people that it is their vocation, and they're called coaches or mentors. And if you are struggling, reach out. And even if it's not on LinkedIn, look at people around you. Reach out to those out there that are ready to go and ready to help, and be a source for encouragement, for truth. Don't look for people that are going to tell you lies and deceptions. Find people that will be honest and real about what they've dealt with. Let's see. Okay. Firsthand witness here. Sherry says that it's true about body weight. My mom's body weight changed. She also appeared younger. All the worry lines disappeared. Yes. The beauty of being ready for death and recognize, and for me, looking at eternity as being better than what we're dealing with now, gives me hope to not despair and to enjoy what I have now, knowing that I'm moving towards a better direction. And again, I want to be very plain and very clearly stated that having afterlife is not an excuse to abandon the life we're given physically and committing suicide. It is not the answer to our problems, because the very act of committing suicide may mean or indicate that we're not prepared for what is after this physical life. And it also keeps us from fulfilling a universal design that we all have, and that is to help others. If nothing else that I do, if I never earn any more money, if I never win anything, competition, nothing else, I know that I am bringing value if I help others around me. And I don't have to look across the globe to do that. Sometimes that happens because of the technology, but many times we've got people right around us, including family, that are looking for us to give them an example of hope so that they can have it. During these times, one of the challenges people face, and quite often the reason that people get so desperate to commit suicide, is they lose all hope. And those of us that have come to a point where we're ready and we're certain of what happens after death, we can be that hope for other people to help them face death, but do it in a healthy fashion. So I hope that you're gaining something here, and you're not feeling. My intent is not to depress everyone by talking about a tough topic. My hope, my desire, my heart is that by discussing this, facing it outside of the sensationalism, outside of the influences, especially of media, is to help us get to a place where we can be lighthouses for each other. There are times where I struggle and I hurt, and I even struggle with losing hope at times. And what I find valuable is being surrounded with people that I can go to that can be a lighthouse for me in my storm. And the more we prepare, the more we gain wisdom and be able to see things from that greater perspective and understand better, then the greater the chance that we can be a lighthouse for someone during their storm. And I believe with all my heart that that is part of our design as a human being, that we are intentionally made that way. And when we get so self-absorbed, which by its very definition, being self-absorbed is not wisdom, because in order to go from knowledge and understanding it to wisdom is when we step outside of ourselves, when we look beyond how it affects me. And then that's where we have wisdom. And when we become selfish, when we're focused only on us and not have compassion and concern for others, I can tell you with great confidence that we are being unwise in our approach. Uh, so I pray for those in the Ukraine, and I pray that it can resolution can come the best way possible with the least harsh or disastrous outcomes for the rest of the world in the process. My bigger prayer is those that are in the storms of war in the Ukraine, or dealing with the harsh physical realities of some of the pandemic, those that are dealing with loss of job. There are a lot of things that can cause us to become fearful and anxious. My prayer for you is that you find a peace through whatever means. Generally, my thought is that the best way to find that peace is through faith, and recognizing, by the way, and this is something that I talk about regularly, is remember that each of us is made up of three major parts. We have a body, Most of us pretty well get that. We also have a soul, which is our mind and our will and emotions. That's where some of us start getting a little bit fuzzy, maybe not as confident, because it's not something we can see and touch, but we certainly experience the results. And then the third component, equally important, is that we are created with a spirit. And one of the key things to living well, the term I like to talk about is living abundantly, is to nurture all three parts of us as a human being. Feed our body, feed it well, exercise it, those things, but also nurture our mind and our will and our emotions, and nurture them well, exercise them, okay, protect them. One of the principles that I encourage everyone is to learn about how to renew your mind. And is where we sometimes talk about our self talk or our narratives. There is a principle of renewing our mind to keep it healthy. And then, of course, nurturing and feeding our spirit. Different people do that different ways. For me, it's prayer, it's reading my Bible, it is spending time with others of the same truth and belief system. And most of all, it means having a day-to-day relationship with my Creator, and know that it's more than just a religious thing for me. I'm not big on organized religion because of the human flaws involved. And so what for me makes the difference is that I am able to have a relationship with my Creator, and I have found a way to make that happen and make that choice. um, let's see. Atif makes a comment. He says, I'm glad you're discussing death, how you recover hope in your moments of distress. Please share your experiential learning. Self-absorption is key to sadness and anxious, and it is my experiential learning. Faith is a master key to restore mental balance. In next Wisdom podcast, please discuss how to get rid of unguarded and mechanical autopilot thoughts. Okay. I will make that the topic of our next discussion on Wisdom Seeker. We'll talk about the concepts, the principles of renewing our mind. More than happy to do that, Atif, because it is valuable. One of the keys to living our physical life is not only being prepared for when it comes to an end, but while we're still here, how to live and have the right narratives and the best self-talk to be able to live well now. So I've accept the challenge. And the hope that I have, though, is that many of us will join us, because in order to best deal with this and gain wisdom is to share it with each other and gain from each other. Every time I approach this podcast, my hope, my heart is that not only can I share any wisdom that I have gained along the way, but I'm always looking to pick up wisdom from everyone participating. So thank you for sharing your wisdom as well, because when we do this, when we seek and gain wisdom together, we become a much stronger human for ourselves and for each other. Well, we're up against the clock. Thank you all that have been here today. I appreciate the comments. I hope that I'm not leaving you with a sense of hopelessness, fear, or anxiety, but rather leaving you with a sense of we can live beyond and through the storms that we face. I can't give you answers how to always stop the storms. There are some about that too, but the bigger picture is how to work through them. And one other key comment. If you do nothing else, take the step of being grateful. Be grateful and thankful, not necessarily for the storms we're in, but in those storms, because uh, being thankful and gracious goes a long way to help us overcome negative and fear and anxiety. So, thanks everyone. I hope this has been fruitful and valuable for you today. And what we will do is next Monday on Wisdom Seeker, we will talk about renewing of our mind, self talk, how to approach life with a healthy mental state, and how to maintain that because it's constantly being assaulted. So, thank you, everyone. God bless. Prayers for the people of the Ukraine, prayers for ourselves and all around us, so that we are, rather than living in fear and anxiety, that we're living with courage and hope and prepared for what we know is inevitable in such a way that we can live in spite of knowing we will be dying. Thank you again. God bless. Have an amazing week. See you next Monday, 8 o'clock. And we will talk about renewing our minds. Thanks, everyone. Bye.